Hi, everybody. It's Dennis Daly, welcoming you to All Week Theater. Every week I take a classic old-time radio episode, cut it up into 5 pieces, and present it for your convenient listening pleasure. Now, Part 4. In this week's series, Mr. Keene, Tracer of Lost Persons.
You're in the importing business. May I ask what you import?
A little of everything, Mr. Keene, from all corners of the world.
I notice a case filled with surgical supplies in the next room. Even a display of crutches. Do you import them, Mr. Carter?
Yes, those came from France. But since I took over the business from Mr. Lorraine's estate, we're discontinuing that line.
Tom Haynes was on crutches when he was murdered, Mr. Carter.
Was he really? I didn't know he used crutches.
Well, I'm informed you discharged him because he was a cripple, saying he couldn't continue his work as a traveling salesman.
Then you were misinformed, Mr. Keene. Who told you that?
The murdered man's widow, Jenny Haynes, told me.
That's wrong. Her husband quit his job here.
Mr. Carter, may Mike Clancy and I look at one of those crutches in the case?
You certainly may not. The case is locked.
Well, I'll open it up and get a pair out anyway, Mr. Keene.
Never mind, Mike. We'll bid Mr. Carter goodbye now.
Glad to have met you, Mr. Keene. I hope I didn't give you any wrong impressions.
I understand. Good day.
Mr. Keene, sir, why are we leaving so fast?
He's sufficiently alarmed as it is, Mike. My request to look at the crutches in that case shocked him.
Oh, yes, it did.
And I picked this card off the floor.
Why, it's Mr. Carter's own card. Expressing sympathy at the death of the murdered man.
Undoubtedly, it was to be sent with a floral offering to Tom Haynes' funeral.
Well, Carter said he didn't know Mr. Haynes was dead, boss.
There's a sinister connection between Carter's office, Mrs. Lorraine's cottage, the agent, Orville Burkett, who rented it to the murdered man, and the crutches.
Yes, boss?
I'm going to ask Lieutenant Hale of the police to confiscate a pair as murder evidence.
Well, what's the next move, Mr. Keene?
We'll return to the office immediately, Mike, and put certain things into operation.
Well, Mr. Keene, sir, a lot of water has gone over the dam, considering we've been back here in the office under an hour.
So it has, Mike. And this record I just found in our files should end the case. I know exactly who our killer is. Hello, Mr. Keene speaking. Yes, Lieutenant Hale. You have the crutches from Mr. Carter's office and are sending them over. Good. I suggest then that you arrest all the suspects I named to you and send them to the murder cottage. Yes, I'll deliver the murderer to the police there. Goodbye.
Shall I get the car now, Mr. Keene?
Somebody's at the door, Mike.
Mr. Keene. Mr. Clancy.
Mrs. Haynes, what happened?
Mr. Burkett, the rental agent, found out where I lived. He threatened to kill me if I said anything to you about poor Tom's crutches.
Saints preserve us.
Then Ambrose Carter phoned me to stay away from that cottage at the price of my life. I'm scared to death.
Mike Clancy and I will protect you, Mrs. Haynes. There's nothing to fear now.
And when I got to our room, it had been ransacked. Even parts of the paper torn off the wall.
I'm not surprised, Mrs. Haynes. Now, Mike and I will take you with us to the death cottage. Hurry, Mike, to the car. Ring the doorbell, will you, Mike? Don't be frightened, Mrs. Haynes.
Oh, Mr. Keene, I'm so relieved it's you. The cottage is surrounded by policemen. Mr. Burkett and Ambrose Carter are in the bedroom. The police arrested them both.
Mrs. Lorraine, this is Mrs. Haynes, the murdered Tom Haynes' widow.
Thanks for offering to help me, Mrs. Lorraine.
My husband was murdered here, too, Mrs. Haynes. Mr. Keene, I can't understand, but Mr. Burkett advised me to move all the furniture out of the cottage. He says he'll put it in storage.
Mrs. Lorraine, you say Mr. Burkett and Ambrose Carter are in the bedroom?
Yes, Mr. Keene. I'll open the door.
Is this your doing, Keene, having me arrested?
Yes, Mr. Burkett. But first, tell me why you attempted to have Mrs. Lorraine move the furniture out of here.
Because I think the cottage would be easier to rent that way, considering the circumstances.
I see.
So join me next time when I take a classic old-time radio episode and split it up into 5 easy-to-digest pieces, right here on All Week Theater.